Hello everyone, Philosopher Stoner 666 here. So yeah, I haven't made a video in a long time. It's been quite a while, but the reason for that is just basically a kind of indifference to everything. You know, realizing that like one way or another doesn't really make any difference. You know, and I've been feeling pretty depressed lately. My life circumstance, I got lots of money in the bank. So it sort of kept me, I'm comfortable. As I've said before in other videos, and as other people other scholarly types have said, you don't need a good time, you need to not have a bad time. So I haven't been, up until lately, having that much of a bad time, livable. I'm comfortable, I have a room, bed to sleep in, food, that's it, Nothing much more than that, but my life's pretty precarious. I was doing teaching ESL. Now I don't do that anymore. I dropped out of a course that I paid quite like $2,000 for. I just dropped out. I couldn't do it anymore. Lots of drama. I was involved in a lawsuit. I won the lawsuit, but I didn't really get the full amount of the damages that I expected. So, I don't teach ESL anymore, so I had a cleaning job there for a while. And then I got into security work, and bullshit, very precarious kind of work. Precarious, bullshit. All these companies, they use you like a toilet paper or a tampon or something like that. It's all very disposable, all very forgettable, all very non-interesting, all very get-overable. You know what I mean? Very forgettable, right? So I was, I sketchy work, right? So like I work Christmas, right? And I gotta work Suicide Watch. Then I work Boxing Day, and I gotta watch this old man that shits himself, that has dementia, shot himself 3 times, and the nurse has gotta come and wipe his ass, and there's no... and it's all the aftermath of the holidays, and then you got to go back to work, and I'm tired of all this shit. I'm getting really fucking tired of it, man. So yeah, as you can see, I worked New Year's Eve, and I got into a fight with someone, and yeah, they drew first blood, and you should see the other guy too, but now it's going to cause me paperwork and a headache and drama. I wouldn't even go out New Year's Eve. I'd just stay in my room. I got no interest. I got no motivation to really do anything. And I'm quite angry person. Even today, I'm walking on the street, and I don't move out of anybody's way anymore. I used to move out of people's way, and I don't move out of anybody's way anymore. And then the guy started yelling and said, "What are you, a fucking bird?" And I didn't say anything. Not worth the headache. Like this thing happened New Year's Eve. My glasses are fine, so I'm not saying anything. I'm not pursuing anything. I'm not doing anything. Don't care. Doesn't matter to me. But all in search of this notion of a good time, right? And then I'm even reading stuff on my Facebook feed and news feeds and stuff. All these people, everybody selling something and selling how you can be happier, right? Like, never mind just being happy. It's always, everything is always in a state of unsatisfiable desire, right? Like, it's not just enough to be happy. You could always be happier, assuming that there's even this positive state of happy that exists, which it's possible. But I personally think that just has to do with ignorance. You haven't lived long enough, or you haven't experienced enough bullshit to make you a cynical, jaded, Scrooge kind of bastard yet about life. And I feel like I'm a young grumpy man, and I was a grumpy man 6 years ago, 8 years ago, and I'm an even grumpier person. I can only imagine what I'm gonna be like when if I make it to fucking 80. And that was another weird conversations going around in the anti-natalist community, I guess, like about that, like the modern mystic, and talking about like were people really, were they better off 2,000 years ago, right? Like, when you think about it, you got a cut, say even 200 years ago, you got a cut, got an infection, you died. You got measles when you were a kid, you died. People didn't live very long. People were lucky to live in their 20s and 30s. People died in their 40s. It was in the Middle Ages, it was dying at 60. Would have been, wow, you're 60, that's pretty old back then. You know, in this area, like when my mom dies at 60, like 61 actually, it's, oh, she died so young. When you got all these old geezers like the guy at the hospital I just mentioned that are like 80, 90 years old, and they gotta get their ass wiped, you know, right? So it's like, well, nobody ever really got to a point where they realized how frothy life can get, right? Because you just died, you didn't live on. So we have more sick people, more mentally ill people, more disabled people that can be maintained and alive due to the nature of a capitalist industrial civilization. We can keep all these people alive. Is it a good thing? I'm walking here in Toronto, and I have little interest in or affection for this city anymore, even though it's the city I was born in, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I'm walking on a street, right? And it's not just, I remember when I was a kid seeing homeless people. It's not just a homeless person or two. It's like a whole fucking 5 or 6, and going down every street there's all these fucking little forts, cardboard box forts, and all this stuff. And it's like, you know, more of these kind of people alive than ever before in human history. All these redundant, useless people. So you figure out of a population of 7 billion people, right, like Schopenhauer's era, Schopenhauerism was a rare condition. Few people made it back in the 1860s to live to his age, to come to the conclusions, right, like to make it to the point where all your friends are dead, all your family's dead, you're all alone, you got no wife, you got nothing, your children might even dead, you might have just got lucky and you outlived your children, you weren't even necessarily an anti-natalist or anything like that, and you're at that point where you're totally alone, and you're like, well, what the fuck was all of this about? You say, figure out of the population of 7 billion, it's got to be, you know, at least 500,000 people in the world, or I think we're quite the minority of a minority, though, but I think there's a lot. Our society is producing a lot more defective people, that's for sure. A lot more of us, and it's as well due to the nature of technology, social, new memes, new ideas, it takes like half or even, you know, a fourth or a third of the time it used to take. Like, so for example, right, Karl Marx's ideas 150, 200 years ago, it took about 150 years for his ideas to go sort of mainstream, and then Lenin, you know, attempted the communist experiment with the disaster, what it was. That's not the point of my tangent here about communism, but, right, like, they didn't have, you know, they had a sketchy kind of, you know, printing press and stuff, so it took a while. Like right in the Middle Ages or in Schopenhauer's era, his ideas didn't, although he was a movement in Germany for a little while there, it couldn't take over society. There wasn't enough, you know, like I said, people that made it to his point to get to those conclusions, or, you know, they couldn't spread. And now in our society, 7 billion, there's a lot more of us, and there's a lot more potential for these ideas to sort of spread. So the game is sort of hopeless, but not totally hopeless, that we can at least convince a lot of people of it. I think it's quite possible. And I was even, oh yeah, that's another little story I wanted to tell. You know, Christmas Day, my dad of all people was watching, you know, True Detective, the one with, you know, Matthew McConaughey or Woody Harrelson. One of my favorite shows. And yeah, he looked like he got punched in the gut with some of the scenes, like the scene with the videotape and stuff. And I had talked to him before about the weird conspiracy stuff, the Pizzagate, which was used by, you know, the alt-right and the tinfoil hat types, but the spiral symbolism. And True Detective, I did some more reading about it. It's based on not just the Thomas Ligotti and Emil Cioran pessimism stuff, but this book called The Franklin Cover-Up by John DeCamp, who was a senator and lawyer in Omaha, Nebraska. And this is an interesting book, and there's an hour-long documentary on YouTube that's about it that was scrubbed. It was supposed to air on the Discovery Channel, and then it got taken down, about the Boys Town orphanage in Omaha, Nebraska, where all these elite guys, this guy Lawrence King, leader of the Black Republicans in the 80s, was involved with the Franklin Credit Union and did this sort of scam, financial scam, and then they covered up all the stuff he was involved with the pedophilia and what's called satanic ritual abuse. And then it was that story forms a basis for a lot of the other ideas explored in True Detective. Anyway, so my dad's watching this fucking Christmas Day of all days, and you know, I think there's a double interpretation to that as well too, that I think that the Rust Cole character, it's actually quite a deception. That there's scenes when, you know, when he sort of they go from like changing the time, you know, the first part of the show is him with short hair, and then when he progresses to where he has the long hair, he looks like Jesus. And there's parts near the end, especially in the last episode, where he becomes the Christ-like figure. And it's something I've talked about in other videos of mine, you know, and it's a well-known concept, the Christ-like figure, the whole redemption narrative in Christianity. And I think it was put in there deliberately because that's the only way it would gained any sort of mainstream credibility, is at least flirting with it in sort of quasi-religious terms. So the anti-natalism is kind of a farce. It's kind of this, I don't know what the word would be, but almost like it's taken on its face value that it's not meant to be taken seriously. It's like a flirtation with it, but it's a flirtation to sort of condemn it. Sort of like the way Macbeth, right? How we talked about life is but a sound and fury signifying nothing and all that stuff. It's sort of, you know, to demonize it, to make that perspective on life seem like it's the evil perspective, even though I don't really think it is, but right, like we could never truly accept those conclusions, but these conclusions and those sort of ideas have been around a long, long time, you know, and I've been getting a lot more into, you know, the pessimistic Christianity stuff, which is quite interesting, right? Orthodox Christianity, a lot of the sects, the interpretations of it, and that's my segue into the next topic here. This book, okay, it's going to be sideways there. I'll show it again. There's always some fucking asshole walking around behind me, but this is the most quiet place I could find. But yeah, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross by John M. Allegro. There's a book published in like the 60s. So sort of, I haven't read it yet, but I'm pretty close to the end. And his thesis is that he's a philologist, kind of like Nietzsche was a philologist, so he knows a lot of different languages and the root words of languages, the origins of words, and saying that if you dissect a lot of the stories in the Bible and, you know, take them back to Greek, Latin, ancient languages, going all the way back to ancient Sumerian, that a lot of its word plays for magic mushrooms, or specifically the Amanita muscaria. And there's the duality, it was seen as like a hermaphrodite plant. It's compared to like a penis entering a vagina, basically. That's how they thought of it. And it was part of all these sort of weird fertility cults. Also the theme of the resurrection, how the mushroom grew. They didn't really understand germination. They didn't understand the complexities of how this thing plant actually grows. It was a mystery plant. It's a kind of drug. And you'd have to read the book for yourself. You know, it's a 400-long-page book. The sources are kind of suspect. You know, I wouldn't be able to verify it 100% because I'm not a philologist. I don't know Greek. I don't know Latin. Don't know any of that stuff. But I'm pretty convinced that there's something to this guy's theory. And it's weird. You know, it's weird because, again, I mentioned my father, right, watching all of this really dark stuff. And he was watching Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And it's related to this book. It's sort of, again, I have to develop my ideas here. But Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, there's all this incestuous stuff. Apparently I found out the guy that owned this book, I won't show you his name, but my uncle originally owned this copy of this book. And my uncle is a pedophile. He molested my cousin. You know, she's like a second cousin. Never met her in person. She lives on the other side of the country. And then, you know, I talked to her and I talked to her mother and verified it's all true. And I never knew this about him. And he is an admitted homosexual, which I don't have a problem with. What people do behind closed doors, consenting adults, is their own business. Always thought that. But yeah, apparently he got a kind of reduced sentence because of inadmissible evidence. A kind of a honeypot, sweetheart deal. kind of thing, lifetime community service. Apparently he did it since she was like 12 years old or something. Also circumstantial evidence, my aunt, my father's sister, also sort of claims that this uncle of mine, sexually assaulted her, tried to rape her, didn't actually rape her, but happened like when they were kids. And she's an alcoholic, and she's all fucked up, and it's kind of disgusting because my father still has something to do with this guy. I saw him during the summer before I knew about this, but I remember my mom telling me about this uncle, that he was a horny guy, that when my parents were still married, he lived with them briefly as a roommate, and she can remember, the only thing she ever told me about this guy is that he was sort of like really horny. He was caught jerking off a couple of times and caught like fucking people in the apartment, like behind closed doors and stuff. But she remember telling me, and she always got a creepy vibe off of him. She never told me any of the pedophilia stuff. I don't think she knew. And then I'm talking to another woman that's a friend of my father's that met this guy at a wedding, and she told me that she got creepy vibes off of something. So there's all this circumstantial evidence. I don't have the court documents. I don't have any of the proof, the solid proof. And you can't be tried again for the same crime twice. So, I don't know all the details, but the guy needs a bullet in the head. But then I sort of think to myself, I think, maybe redemption is possible if there's sincere atonement, kind of like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, where, if you sit alone in a room alone and reflect on your crime, if you do good deeds, if you make it up to the victim, maybe after 20, 30, or 40 years, eventually you'll be redeemed if it's sincere. But this guy, as far as I know, has just continued his life of depravity and debauchery. More circumstantial evidence, he's been to Thailand under the guise of being a gemologist or flirting with gemology. But I've been Southeast Asia, lived out there for a bit. And yeah, it's all just greasy, perverted stuff. So most likely, who the fuck knows what he's done. So there's no real repentance there. Anyways, that's my disgusting uncle. But it's creepy because I've researched into the Pizzagate stuff. I've researched into this Franklin cover-up stuff. And it's sort of my thesis has been, and other people have said this, I'm not original in saying this at all, is that fiction is news and news is fiction. Right. Most of the mainstream media narrative of a lot of stuff going on in the world, it's all total bogus, total bullshit. And real stories, like news stories, are revealed in fictional things like True Detective. Right? So it's basically an expose on this thing, the Franklin cover-up, or it's based off of the story, similar, the spiral symbolism, all that shit's there, and it's real. It's based off the FBI documents, FBI pedophile symbolism. You can Google it, and you'll see all these documents. That it's that was why that show was so good, is because you could feel there was something real about it. Anyways, I digress too much. But yeah, it's creepy because my uncle owned this book, and this book goes into a lot of really weird sexual stuff. That these mushrooms were used in sort of rituals and weird stuff. So I think possible that he, there's a quasi-religious bent to a lot of these pedophiles. It's not the lone gunman theory. It really is kind of like what's flirted with in True Detective, that it's a generational thing, that it's like a kind of like a cult thing. Sorry, somebody just walked by. There's really few places for me to go or I get any privacy at all. It's ridiculous. But it was like a cult thing, right? A quasi-religious justification to it. Based on, a lot of bibble babble, jumble. I don't believe in Satan. I don't believe in Lucifer. I don't believe in any of the pagan gods myself. But that doesn't mean that people stopped truly believing in them. Like, I do think there are devil worshippers, people that worship it's all a bunch of kookery, just like the way Islam's kookery and Christianity's kookery and this and that kookery. But it's some kind of weird symbolism, and I've totally lost my innocence. Like, I can't, the reindeer symbolism in Christmas, that's referring to spirit animals. And this god, the horned god, Cernunnos, which later turned into Satan because the Christians fought all these sort of battles, religious warfare basically with the pagans, and they incorporated. It's all well known, right? The festival of Saturnalia, all that stuff, and it got incorporated. But then it was that these pedophiles and these stuff, a lot of weird sick shit going on, the spiral symbolism, they're using a quasi-religious justification for their actions. It's not, there is no lone gunman theory, right? Like JFK, nobody believes the grassy knoll lone gunman theory. Very few people believe that. So there's stuff going on in the world, and this book fucking creeps me out because it belongs to my uncle that I know is a pedophile and stuff, and there's something going on that I can't put my finger on it. I'm, looking into it, researching it, and I have no idea what the fuck's going on. But yeah, this is a worthwhile read. It's a good book. I don't read a lot anymore lately. It's something I like to do. And there's very few people I can talk to about it. Like, nobody really wants to talk about this shit, so I guess, I figured I'd make a video. But yeah, it's none of it is uplifting stuff. Doesn't make me, I am a really bitter, angry, shitty person. Like, because I've become indifferent. Like, it's a struggle for me to get out of bed in the morning. I think about killing myself all the time and stuff, and I'm just a coward, and I can't do it yet. But yeah, I'm very, very, very tired. I'm tired of everything. I'm like rust coal, right? I don't want to know anything anymore, man. It's fucking, But yeah, it's strange. Again, I just wanted to talk about this stuff because my father's been getting into it. That like I said before, the ideas are spreading. Like, it's taking like a third or half the time or less for an idea, say something like antinatalism, for it to make it into the public consciousness, into the zeitgeist, and it's out there, and people are becoming more and more aware that something is not quite right, something is off. And anyways, I've been yammering for 22 minutes here. I'm gonna shut up now. Philosopher Stoner 666 out.